Okay, who is that?
Yeah, I think
The far right are after you lot tonight.
Oh, they certainly are.
Hold them in the waiting room before you let them in. And if they're not any persons that you can identify, ask them who they are. And if they don't declare themselves, just don't let them in.
Yep, we're gonna have to be hard and.
Shut your stupid ass up, bitch! Suck my fucking dick.
Shut the fuck up, pussy. Fuck you.
Yeah, split your fucking ass.
Oh my, such vulgar language.
Hello, teacher.
All right, so gentlemen, before
Shut the fuck up, you fucking nigga!
else in, please.
You ain't nothing but a broke boy.
What's going on?
Yeah, we've been spammed. Yeah. So yeah, like I said, before we let anybody else in, please, gentlemen, ask them who they are, clarify who they are, then let them in.
It says you've got one inception.
One.
There's one waiting. Says hi. Don't let him in.
Well, like I said, you can ask the question who he is or she is.
I removed it because that was one of the ones that just did it a minute ago.
Got you. Right. Once again, family, sincere apologies for you having to hear that foolishness tonight.
Oh, hello. Sorry. Hello.
Hi there, One Tawny. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, I can. Have you gotten rid of that one called Claudine Lewis as well? Because she's sending links to a porn website as well.
Claudine Lewis. One moment, sir. Thank you very much. Looks like she's no longer in here.
Darren, if you see iPhone, that's me. It's mean I'm just logging in from my phone.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So, TTIP family, I'm going to leave it for you to be the warriors, stand guard and let various people in who can actually advise us they are actually valid people. Other than that, let me crack on with the broadcast or we will actually play into their hands and we won't get anything done tonight. To one and all who has joined us tonight, thank you very much. Allow me just one moment. Let me get my camera right. Yes, so thank you one and all for joining us tonight. Apologies you had to... You got that one? Yeah.
Hope so.
Yes, once again, apologies one and all that you had to go through that foolishness with somebody spamming us with the bad language and everything else and all that. Once again, as I usually say on these broadcasts, the bad guys will do what the bad guys do best, which will try and cause havoc. Now, just to advise one and all, this broadcast will be live on the likes of Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. And if you allow me a few moments, I'll just also make Amina a host as well, so she can help keep those pesky people out the way. Okay, and I'm just going to quickly do one last setting on mine. With you all in a few moments, going live on Facebook. Okay, we're nearly live. Amina, are we live on the other social media
Yeah,
platforms?
we're all good to go everywhere else.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. Yep, and we are now live on Facebook. So yeah, greetings one and all. I do apologise once again for that nonsense earlier on. Unfortunately, it looks like we've lost quite a few people as well, but I'm sure they will understand and come back at a later on this evening. Okay, so let me get the proceedings underway. So I'm just going to share my screen and we'll get into the actual slideshow. Okay, so you all should be seeing my screen by now. Anybody can't see my screen with the actual slideshow? So that silence I'm going to take as a no. So yes, let's begin. So, great welcome and salutations to one and all. And we'll just give you a quick run through of what our agenda will be this evening. We'll do some quick introductions. We'll be giving you a quick blow by blow with regards to where we are and what we're doing as a party. We'll then go on to our volunteers and supporters section. And then we will get to our guest speaker, who I'm proud to say is Cole Grant, who is also known as a community activist. And should we have any time at the end, by all means, we can go to any other business. So, introductions. My name's Darren Bryan. I'm a member of the TTIP party. I will be your actual host throughout the evening. We will have various people from the TTIP party also speaking, the likes of the the co-founders, one being a Mr. Charles Gordon and the other a Mr. Andrew Morris. And we may have a few others from the TTIP party joining proceedings as well. So, as you can also see in the slides, bottom right, just to remind one of all, this broadcast is being recorded on the likes of Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Okay. May I politely ask if there are any members of the press, by all means, if they actually joined early, I'm sure they got quite a mouthful as well. If you would be so kind to actually advise you are from the press, and by all means advise us if there's any particular reason you have joined, whether that be to actually join TTIP. We're always happy to have journalists spreading our cause, or else. What TTIP are currently doing? Every Wednesday we are doing food larders. That is being done throughout the Croydon area. We also have a GoFundMe to assist with the said food larders. What we will do, we'll be dropping in the actual chat the information and websites for one and all to help with the GoFundMe as well. Membership. Once again, we welcome one and all, no matter who you are. Remember, we are here for the people. We know you've probably heard that one too many times from other so-called political parties. And as you can see, I'm sure a few of you have joined us. I'm thinking, well, we've heard this one before. Let's see what you actually can do. Once again, we are here to listen to you, the people, and do what you, the people, want. We're all too fully aware. We've seen how the likes of Labour, Liberal Democrats have used and abused their positions. No need to even speak about the so-called Conservative Party. But yes, we would like to think that we are a breath of fresh air in the political landscape. However, in order for us to make change, we need you, the good people, to come on board and help us shape a new Britain and even a new way of life. With that being said, we're looking for councillors to come forth to stand in local elections. We're also looking for a steering group leader as well. So by all means, if you do feel that you do have the pedigree, and by all means, those who would like to be a councillor, please bear in mind, we also do give the training as well. So you will not just be left on your lonesome. We will ensure that you have all the right tools to be an effective councillor as possible. And that is what we are looking for. Once again, all that information will be put in the chat very shortly. We also have what's known as community heroes. So if you have anybody in your neighborhood, in your constituency, who you believe has gone above and beyond, especially in this trying time known as the pandemic, by all means, please do go to our website and do nominate them. We do like to hear who is really making a difference in one's community. Already in terms of billboards, we have plenty going on in the Croydon area. So if you do live in the Croydon area, you may have been fortunate to see those particular billboards as well. And just to reiterate again, once again, we are here to push your points of views. We're not here to be career politicians, career MPs. We've had enough of that. We need to make sure that we represent you, the people. And with that being said, Charles Gordon or Andy Morris, would you like to say anything before I continue?
No, we're is my mic on even? Hold on. Yeah, sorry, no, I'm good actually, to be fair. Just apologies to everyone for the spam and the confusion it's caused. But yeah, no, everything's said perfectly. The only thing I'd like to just to elaborate on is just the steering group members. Those steering group effectively are people that will be looking after TTIP's interest outside of London and outside of the areas that we focus our energies on primarily. And effectively set up their own effective satellite version of TTIP. And with the councillor situation, we're looking for people that want to represent at local government level. So basically local government councillor level. So effectively you'll become you'll be elected for a councillor within your local borough, and you'll be surprised how few votes are needed in order to attain that position. In some cases it's as little as 150, in other cases it's 1,000. But just to expand on that, but other than that, Darren, you do your thing. All right.
Many thanks, sir.
Yeah, nothing from me, Darren. Thank you.
Excellent. Many thanks, Andy. So, volunteers and supporters. So, hopefully we already have in the chat all the information you need to get in contact with us. If you would like to directly contact us, you can contact us via Amina, as per the email address above. If you could actually just prefix the subject matter with volunteers and supporters application, please quote your name, email, telephone number, skill set. What you would like to assist TTIP with. And these are just a few of the actual positions we are looking to recruit upon in the coming months. Okay, so with that being said, main topic of tonight being human rights. We have an excellent brother here by the name of Cole Grant. He's going to give us an absolutely, I would say, a truly brilliant masterclass tonight in respect of what he does, what his lifetime experience has been, and how we as a people should be aware of our right within the UK. And yeah, it's really going to be truly enlightening. Before we begin, however, what I would like to do if you allow me one moment. Yeah, and that's because they've done that. Yeah, so I won't be able to do that just yet. Okay, so Cole, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to share your slides as per our discussions previously. By all means, sir, if you would like to unmute yourself, and we'll begin where we left off on Tuesday evening, sir.
Excellent. Can you hear me?
We certainly can.
Excellent. Okay, are we good to go?
We're good to go, sir.
Okay, well, first and foremost, I want to thank you so much. Thank you all so much for allowing me the opportunity, the privilege, if you like, of being on your platform and coming to share my experience here with Take the Initiative Party. I think I was introduced to you by...
Yo, nigger.
Thank you, Amina. By Sasha Johnson, whom I have to say had the pleasure of being arrested alongside on Saturday, the 16th of January, when we went to show solidarity or stand in solidarity with the family who had, with the young man who had died several hours after being released from police custody in Wales. So that was an absolute pleasure for me.
Hey,
I should
hoe de
say,
fuck? David, dat is letterlijk volskreven met me.
I should say that I wonder if it's my invitation, because I understand this is the first time that you're having these spam attacks. I wonder. I agree with you, Darren, that you're obviously having an impact, and this is what I think it was. Forgive me for using this example, but was it Gandhi who said, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. So if you weren't having any effect or any impact, then you wouldn't be getting that. I just want to say, look, I first got introduced to your party, Taking the Initiative T-shirt here, on the Million People March sometime last year, where I was involved with that march, and I think that's where I first came across Charles, and then I think I met Charles again recently at Inner London Crown Court. So yeah, once again, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to come and share my story with you, and indeed my experience. And I would say probably before all of this, I was a naive, conforming, law-abiding citizen who believed in the system, supported the system. I remember, in fact, when I was at school, when my friends used to come, when we used to come back to school after a weekend break on a Monday, and then my friends would be talking about what the police did, when they went to the football matches and so on and so forth, and how the police behaved. And I would be thinking, oh no, you must have done something wrong if the police behaved like that. As I said, it was a very, very naive, conforming, believing in the system citizen, until 3rd of September 1994, when my son was left to die. My 15-month-old son was left to die from dehydration in a state hospital. And an hour before he died, the additional trauma that they subjected me to, and their negligence also, apart from my son's death, if that wasn't bad enough, led to the breakup of my 10-year marriage and the breakup of my family, a marriage in which I had started a family. There was my daughter was 5 at the time. My son who had passed away, who they had left to die, was 15 months, and my wife was pregnant with our 3rd child. And at that time, I'd been married about 10 years, and that marriage just came to an end 5 months after my son's death. Now, what had happened on the night of my son's death, I had gone to my wife took our son to the hospital, and at some point I'd gone to the hospital myself looking for my family, and I was repeatedly told that my son had not been admitted. He only had a tummy upset, and so he hadn't been admitted to the hospital. I was told to check the children's section, which I did, and they confirmed again that he wasn't there. So as I left that section, there was a telephone in the corridor which I used to call home to see if I had passed my wife on the way to the hospital. And I got no reply. I went back to the main reception and told her, look, they're not at home. And the receptionist once again reassured me that my son was not at that hospital. He had not been admitted. I left fully reassured and went back home, and my wife still hadn't arrived back home, and I was just curious as to where they might have been. I subsequently received a phone call from one of my brother-in-laws. Now, he was a twin. One lived in Margate, the other one lived in London. And the one in Margate called me to say his sister is at hospital crying, the baby is not well. And I was almost arguing with my brother-in-law, saying that, no, they're not there. I've just come back from the hospital and they're not there. So I agreed with him that I would phone. Now, I've put the phone down. As I've put it down, the phone has immediately rang again. This time it was my wife screaming down the phone, get the hell out of the flat, the baby is not well. I slammed the phone down on my wife, thinking that her brother had come to London and they'd all met up at the other twins' apartment here in London and was playing some cruel joke. But nonetheless, I didn't leave anything to chance. I immediately picked up the phone again, dialed the hospital, and with half an hour with my son, I was still being told, no, Mr. Grant, your son's not here. So I pleaded with the receptionist to double check. She checked the first ward and he wasn't there. She checked the second ward, and I can only imagine the receptionist being in a state of shock because she didn't say another word to me. She put me straight through to the ward, and the next thing I heard was, oh, Mr. Grant, come quickly, your son's here, he's not well. I rushed back to the hospital to go and find my son. My 15-month-old son had just died. I collapsed to the ground, and it was my 5-year-old daughter who came and put her arms around me and said, don't cry, Daddy, at least he's gone to heaven. Now, and then I was taken to where my son was. Now, my wife was just blaming me for not being there. If you had been there, you would have made the doctors do things. I mean, with all initially, I tried to absorb all of that and be the punching bag for her, because I couldn't imagine the hell, the nightmare, the pain that she went through to watch her own child die in the way. You know, when they were brought in, what she explained to me, what happened when she arrived at casualty, she was seen quite quickly, and as he was a baby, and the junior doctor that saw him was quite concerned, and he ordered X-rays. It was a twisted intestine, so he ordered X-rays. And when the X-rays came back, he, as far as he was concerned, confirmed his opinion. But he had to get a senior doctor to admit the baby to the hospital. And when the senior doctor came, he refused, saying that there's nothing wrong with this baby. It's only a tummy upset. And so the junior doctor said to my wife, whatever you do, do not leave this hospital with that baby. And then subsequently, after 5 hours sitting in casualty, she was then told to take him up to one of the wards. And within half hour of arriving on the ward, he collapsed and died. They could find no veins to prepare him for a drip, so he'd become dehydrated, sitting there in casualty and all that time. So after at one point, we took the advice of solicitors regarding negligence, not motivated about money, just the fact that what my wife described to me in a junior doctor wanting to admit the baby, and a senior doctor overriding him and saying, no, there's nothing wrong, and then subsequently causing my son to die. So we took legal advice and were granted legal aid to pursue the case against the hospital. Now, 5 months after our son's death, because of that blame that my wife kept on at me, we became separated. And a year after being separated from my family, trying to grieve for my son, but feeling like I'm grieving for my whole family, I went to the lawyers and I said, I want to sue the hospital for giving me false advice, which led to me being absent, which resulted in the breakup of my marriage. And although the lawyers had been issued with the legal aid certificate to pursue that case, they told me in writing that there is no law in this country that would allow me to sue for false advice. Now, I found that very, very difficult to accept. And for me, again, this was nothing to do with financial motivation or the possibilities of financial motivation. This was all about now trying to save my marriage, to save my family. So I wanted to prove to my wife that I came, and they sent me away. And so, as I said, the lawyers refused, telling me that in writing, telling me that there is no law that would allow me to sue for false advice, whilst I started making inquiries at other law firms, and everyone, in fact, the Law Society told me I should change my lawyers because there are laws. Another law firm gave me a previous case reference to bring to my lawyers. And another law firm said they were quite prepared to act for me, but the previous lawyers wouldn't release the legal aid certificate. It wasn't until my MP at the time, who was Tessa Jowell, wrote to the Legal Aid Board asking them to transfer my certificate to a new set of lawyers. And by the time that certificate had been transferred, I suffered a nervous breakdown, lost my job, and now I instructed the new solicitors. I said that I want you to include the previous solicitors in the lawsuit against the hospital. And at that point, the legal establishment decided to gang up against me to prevent me, because the law firm, the previous law firm, were quite a prominent firm of lawyers. You may have heard of them, and they may well have represented people in this meeting tonight. But Byman and Partners, they're pretty much high up there in the human rights representation. So as a result of their stature and so on, they were able to start influencing people within the system. And so eventually I began with no legal experience whatsoever, just by, if you like, following process and procedure. I began suing the law firm and the hospital myself, and I issued a writ which they had no defense available to them, because I think most importantly, because I sued them for a breach of contract as opposed to a negligence, because what I understand is that a negligence claim you could establish that they had been negligent, and no matter how outrageous that negligence was, if it didn't cost you a penny, then you couldn't recover a penny. All you could do is prove that they were negligent, whereas a breach of contract was quite different. And again, I'm not suggesting that this was about money, but I would just made sure that I presented a lawsuit that was going to have an effect or an impact on them if proven. So having filed a lawsuit against them and them not having no defense, all they could do was to rely on their friends within the system. And so they were trying to have my case struck out of court. And at that time, as you can imagine, with no help coming towards myself legally, I just kind of protested. So whilst they were trying to have the case struck out, I was trying to have it forced back in. So one of the things that I did was to engage in civil disobedience. So I went and spray painted the lawyers' windows so that I could be arrested for criminal damage potentially, and I was. And my intention at the time was to use that platform to say exactly what they had done, which led to me doing what I did. And so I was arrested on bail pending trial. And one evening, a bunch of officers came to my parents' home to arrest me for alleged breach of bail conditions. Now, to be guilty of that, first and foremost, you have to be on bail, and secondly, you have to have conditions attached to your bail. Now, as I've just said, I was on bail for this criminal damage, but there were no conditions attached to my bail for me to be in breach of. Nonetheless, officers from Holborn Police Station, the Metropolitan Police Force, came, arrested me, brought me to Holborn Police Station, where they were holding me, or where they held me overnight. Now, I always, or since the deaths in custody, the black deaths in particular in custody, I always take precautions whenever I'm in police custody. And one of those precautions are, or some of those, I refuse to eat, drink, and if they're holding me overnight, I try to avoid sleeping. I think the reasons for those things are fairly obvious. The hardest of those to do is if you're being held overnight, is to stay awake. But nonetheless, I try to put all those things into play. But at some point during the night, I think it was about 2 a.m., in the middle of the night, I had dozed off for a few seconds, but it was long enough for officers to have opened the cell door, and I jumped up out of my sleep to find two officers creeping into the cell, claiming that they had just changed shifts and they were wondering if I wanted something to eat. Now, at 2 a.m. in the morning, a prisoner is sleeping and officers claiming that they were coming in to wonder if I wanted something to eat. My view is that had I not jumped out of my sleep, I would have been smothered to death, and then they would have put out, something about committed suicide, or because he tried to sue about the death of his child and wasn't happy with the outcome, therefore, etc., etc. Anyway, I survived the night and was presented to court the following morning. Now, when the prosecution said in court breach of bail conditions, I stood up to say that there was no conditions attached, and the judge screamed at me, "Shut up and sit down. You have an advocate there on your behalf." I'd never met this person before, and she never said a thing about whether there were bail conditions or no bail conditions. And so this judge remanded me to Brixton Prison. This was at the age of 36 and my first time ever experiencing prison. He remanded me to Brixton Prison for 5 days. When I was brought back 5 days later before a different judge, the first thing this new judge asked was, why is Mr. Grant in custody? And the prosecution proudly said, oh, breach of bail conditions. And the judge said, but there are no conditions attached to his bail for him to be in breach of. Why is he in custody? And the once jubilant Crown prosecutor went silent. And then the judge said, look, I made it clear a long time ago, I do not wish to become embroiled in any form of corruption. And he released me. Now, that was my first experience of prison. I can tell you, when they remanded me to Brixton Prison, this was in March 1998, I was actually petrified for my life. Having survived the police station, I thought that they were going to absolutely make sure that I did not come back out of that prison alive. Thereafter, the next time that I was the matter with regards the spray paint and windows and so on and so forth, that eventually went to trial. I was convicted in a magistrate's court, as you would expect, but I appealed the conviction to a Crown court, and my defense was one of justification, and the conviction was quashed. So the next time, almost a year later, in February 1999, March 1999, a senior judge in the High Court, presided over a matter which was being prosecuted by his brother or his brother's law firm. And this judge conducted those proceedings in my absence, no legal representation. And at the end of it, he issued a warrant for me to be picked up off the streets and brought straight to prison. No charge, no trial, no ever passing through a court of law. I was literally kidnapped from the streets and brought to Pentonville Prison, where I remained for 10 solid weeks before the prison authorities realized I should not have been there, and they made arrangements for me to be presented in the High Court in the Strand before a different judge. And when that judge heard how I came to be in prison, I could literally hear the disappointment and disapproval in his tone when he turned to me and said, Mr. Grant, the background of your case is extremely tragic, and there are many ways in which you can pursue it. Go home to your family. And he let me out. When I stepped out of the High Court in the Strand onto the steps, I stood there for a moment and I wondered to myself, how many of our people previously have been subjected to that form of unlawful imprisonment, and they've not had anywhere to turn, no one to turn to, no means of challenging that, etc. And so on that day, which I believe was the 28th of May, 1999, I decided that I would fight. And that fight for justice has continued ever since. And it led to, I started complaining to members of Parliament, the Prime Minister, down in Buckingham Palace. In fact, I think I'd complained to Buckingham Palace before, because the first communication I received from Buckingham Palace, written on behalf of the Queen, was dated January 1998. And then that letter said, whilst the Queen acts on the advice of her ministers, she cannot intervene directly, but she's instructed that my letter should be passed directly to Derry Irvine, who was the then Lord Chancellor. And it went on to say that, I know he is already aware of your case, but now he will also be aware of your approach to Her Majesty on this matter. And Derry Irvine, having received directly from Buckingham Palace issues of if you like, criminal activity carried out not just by the Metropolitan Police Force, but members of the judiciary, and Irvine did nothing. And I would suggest to you that is why Tony Blair had to, or decided rather, to abolish the Lord Chancellor's Department and create the Ministry of Justice. I'm aware that judges were against the abolishment or abolishing of the Lord Chancellor's Department, which has been in force for about 1,300 years. So they were saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But they wouldn't reveal the real reason why they were, and they still haven't revealed the real reason why they abolished the Lord Chancellor's Department and created a Ministry of Justice. I think the role itself had become, we had started complaining about the fact that how can it be that the Lord Chancellor is the head of the judiciary, and at the same time, in those days, he sat in the government as well. He was a minister of the cabinet or a minister of the government. So if the government is independent from the judiciary, then how was that possible? And I suggest that it was our complaining about all of those things, and of course what Irvine had done, which led to that department being abolished. And now the head of the judiciary is the Lord Chief Justice, as opposed to the Lord Chancellor. So we after that, I think I wrote to Tony Blair complaining about what had happened, and they eventually wrote back to me. They referred the matter to the Lord Chancellor's Department, I beg your pardon, and then the Lord Chancellor's Department wrote back to me confirming what had happened, confirming what I just told you about the judge and his brother or his brother's law firm and so on, but claiming that there was no grounds to allege bias or anything like that. And just for the record, all of these things that I'm saying, they are supported by documented evidence, i.e. letters from Buckingham Palace, the letter I just referred to from the Lord Chancellor's Department confirming the judge and his brother or his brother's law firm, etc. All of these things are documented evidence. Now, it came to a point, and I'm trying to kind of reduce the story, if you like, because it's very long. It came to a point where because I was not getting any protection of law, I couldn't seek any, I weren't able to get any redress. And I came to a point naturally where I thought, well, why should I obey the law if the law doesn't do anything for me? So again, as a matter of civil disobedience, I started doing things which challenged the authorities to either prosecute me or leave me alone. So for instance, I started driving my vehicle without tax and insurance, and if I accidentally got pulled by a police officer in my uninsured, untaxed vehicle, as soon as they'd done a name check and realized who I was, they would put their hand out to shake mine. Okay, Mr. Grant, have a safe journey home. If I had a hearing at court, I could go in my uninsured vehicle and I could leave it parked outside the court building, and it would have a police guard guarding my vehicle to make sure that no one interfered with it whilst I was in the court. If I had a meeting at Scotland Yard, I could go and park my uninsured vehicle outside Scotland Yard, and it would have a police guard at my vehicle until I came back from my meeting. But all of this got to a point where it wasn't really advancing our cause, and so I then stepped things up, and I started. Please don't be shocked or alarmed by what I say about the increase in what I was doing. I stepped up the actions I was doing, and I started going backwards. I was being paid to go backwards and forwards and pick up a parcel from wherever and bring it into the country, etc., etc. As I said, I was doing that in the full intention is either you stop me and prosecute me, and of course subject me to the due process, or you leave me the hell alone, and I will use my position to raise funds, not only to look after my family, but to fund our campaign and to fund other things within our community. Kind of like using the venom of the snake to cure the bite. I'm sure that gives an idea of where what I was doing. So on my 8th trip, I was coming back from Jamaica with 2 suitcases, and I'll say what it was now. Please don't be alarmed. But I was coming back from Jamaica with 2 suitcases, equal quantity of cannabis in each. However, one of the suitcases had my details on, the other one didn't. And so they didn't know. The one with my details came round as normal, unhindered, untouched. But the other one, which didn't have my details, they kept it back and they went through it, and they waited until almost everyone had collected their luggage and had gone off, and I was there waiting for mine. My point that, I wasn't running. It's either stop me and arrest me and prosecute, or leave me the hell alone. So by the time the suitcase was coming round, I could already smell the cannabis as it was approaching. So I had the opportunity to leave, but I didn't. And when it came and I picked it up, I expected the arrest at that point. And when I immediately told them my name, etc., etc., etc. Now, my defense was always going to be justification. Justification because of the unlawful actions that had been carried out against me, which I've tried to get resolved, and the authorities have failed to remedy it. So having been put before a jury, the judge directed the jury that there are no defenses of justification in English law. Now, that's a complete misdirection, because there are defenses of duress of circumstances. There's self-defense, there's necessity, etc. There's mistake. So these are all defenses that do not deny the act, but they offer a reason for why you acted in that way. And if you can show justification for your action, then the law says you've not acted unlawfully. But this judge directed the jury that there are no defenses of justification in English law. And ironically, he said, for the reasons he has put forward, he seeks an acquittal. Because if he's right, no court or jury can stop him or convict him of anything. That was the only actual thing about what he said. And that is a perilous situation for the authorities. So, okay, they convicted me. But the process or procedure doesn't end there. The matter isn't over until the appeal part of the process is exhausted. So after conviction, I filed a notice of appeal. Now, the process in this country, it goes to a single judge behind closed doors, and that judge will decide whether or not, or agree whether or not there are grounds for an appeal. If the judge agrees, then an appeal will be granted, and if not, they'll refuse it. However, the appellant has the absolute right to renew the application to go into court for an oral hearing, because the law says we have the right to be heard, not for matters to be dealt with on paper. We have the right to be heard, and so having renewed my application, they conducted proceedings. They refused me legal aid, so I couldn't afford a lawyer, and then they refused me my right to come and represent myself. So they conducted the proceedings without me. Now, that was a violation of the due process. And I know I've just told you I brought cannabis in the country. That now should be irrelevant in comparison to the due process of law. And because that is absolute paramount. Even for the most heinous of crimes, this system says that due process is absolutely fundamentally number one. So they kept me locked up in prison for 6 years. In fact, it was 44 kilos of cannabis. Whilst inside, I met someone who had 135 kilos. They got 2 years. Oh no, I tell a lie. They got 4 years for 135 kilos. I had 45 kilos and I got 8 years of prison sentence. So I know it was political. And then the person who got 4 years, they did 2 years and went home. Despite the fact that I was an enhanced prisoner throughout my whole time in prison, when it came to the halfway mark, they refused to release me after 4 years. So I had to do 5 years and 4 months out of that 8 years. And then they said they needed me to hand over to them the £85,000 I had made in my trips and so on and so forth. Otherwise, I was to do another 18 months in prison. Now, obviously, I weren't able to give them that £85,000, so I had to do another 9 months, half of the 18 months that they added to the sentence. Therefore, they kept me in prison for 6 years and 1 month. During that time, I filed 4 applications seeking what they call a writ of habeas corpus. And that habeas corpus is the most fundamental protection of liberty and process in the court system. So such is the importance of it. If you went to court and with a habeas corpus application, and all the courts were busy, all the judges were busy hearing other cases, they would have to find a judge to adjourn whatever matter they were dealing with and deal with the application. I mean, give you an instance where that might be used. An aeroplane is just about to take off with deportations, etc. And there's someone on that aeroplane who shouldn't be, or who someone say shouldn't be. They could go to court and with an habeas corpus application, which would enable them to have that flight stopped so they could get that person off the flight and produce them in court to show that they're being lawfully deported or whatever. That is the level of importance when it comes to habeas corpus. Now, and it's a matter which has to be heard. It's not a paper process in any sense of the way, in any sense at all. So, as I said, I filed 4 of those applications, and whilst I was given a hearing date for each time they were due to come up, a judge or the respective judge would order the prison authorities not to produce me in court for my own hearing. And remember, the law says, in particular, Article 6 says, in the determination of their civil rights and or obligations or criminal charges brought against them, everyone has the right to be heard. And they can either represent themselves or be legally represented. And if they can't afford legal representation, then the state should afford one for them. But the most fundamental thing is have the right to be heard. Now, again, they had to pervert the due course of justice in order to keep me or from coming through the process with the argument of what has taken place. So as I said, I was kept in prison for 6 years and 4 months. Now, here's the beautiful irony, or I don't know if it's an irony, but because I represented myself, I had a friend who was sending me law books whilst I was in prison. Now, normally, I think it's probably still the case that prisoners aren't allowed to have hardback books sent into them. So although my friend was sending these law books to me, the prison authorities wouldn't allow me to have them. So one day at court, I made a complaint. I said, I get very little time to go to the prison library, and I'm not allowed to take any of the books from the library back to my cell. However, I had a friend who'd sent law books to me, which the prison authorities wouldn't allow me to have. And the judge, I guess he was just being rather arrogant. I'm sure he wasn't trying to be helpful, but he ordered the prison authorities to give me access to my books. And so that evening when I returned to the prison, the number one governor was waiting in reception to hand me those books they had already received. Thereafter, each time my friend sent in a law book, it just came straight to me. In the end, I ended up with a cell that looked pretty much like a law library. And so the 6 years I spent in prison, I made time serve me rather than me serve time. And so I spent that time studying the law. And I guess it was probably their worst nightmare, because whilst I'm not heaping no praise on myself, but if I was a jagged, single-edged sword when I went in, I'm sure that was more like a double-edged sharpened sword once they released me. And within 9 months of my release, they offered me a job working with Serco. Serco is the people that they transport prisoners around London. And they currently run the London Cycle Hire Scheme. Serco run hospitals, they run schools, I think they're responsible for the detention, Hareswood detention centre, and so on. They're a global company. But there was one day when I had gone to sign on, and they were asking me for my proof of job search, and threatening that if I didn't produce any proof of job search, they were going to stop any payments to me. And I basically said, look, I didn't do any job search. The state owes me money, and if you stop my money, then there's going to be problems. So, of course, the person whom I was talking to had no idea where I was coming from, what I was talking about. So I just rang the probation and I told them that they were threatening to stop my benefit. And I told them that obviously if they did, then there was going to be huge problems. And then the next thing was I received a phone call telling me that they've got this position available on a new scheme that was about to start. That was the London Cycle Hire Scheme. And if I was interested in taking up a role in that. And I've always worked, as I said, from when I left school, being this naive, believing, conforming, whatever, I'd always been in employment. So signing on wasn't particularly what I wanted to do, but it was coming out of prison after 6 years was going to be a challenge to sit down in front of any employer to try and get paid employment. So when they offered me an opportunity to a job that they were offering me, the sensible thing I thought was to take that job. In the meantime, there have been a number of cases which, in terms of community work, even prior to going to prison, there were people who we would be helping, whether it's criminal charges or in civil cases, especially in criminal charges, just by us being present in court. We could have cases dismissed without any further action. There was one case where we had appeared in court for a matter with regards myself, and there was a brother. The next case up was a brother. Can't remember what his case was about. However, we decided to remain seated in the public gallery at the court. And of course, the judge wasn't sure whether that was one of our members or not. So when the case came up, he just called the prosecutor and he said, even without the prosecutor making any representation, whatever, he just said, this matter has been going on long enough now, and so I'm dismissing it. And I'm absolutely sure they dismissed that matter. I was able to, whenever, and I'm going to say something here that I'm not proud of at all. I absolutely no way proud of this. But just to show how afraid they eventually became, there was a time I was at a magistrate's court, and it appeared as though they weren't listening. and I was in the dock, and as I turned around, there was a security officer, and I just knocked out that security officer. Don't think that I don't come with violence or anything like that. It's just that was just sheer frustration. But the fact that I punched out a member of court staff and no action was taken against me as a result of that was disgusting shame on them. But that's how desperate they are to keep me from going before a jury and so on and so forth. Albeit, I know I just said, they brought me before a jury back in 2003, I think it was. But now it has reached a point, obviously, because we've taken our time in prison and studied the law. I think, in our discussion, Darren, I mentioned Article 5, the protection of one's liberty. Article 5 makes it absolutely clear that no one shall be deprived of their liberty except in a procedure prescribed by law. So when I've described how officers came and arrested me, accusing me of breach of bail, and then having me locked up in prison and so on, if the law says no one shall be deprived of their liberty except in a procedure prescribed by law, then you can't just make up allegations and go and arrest someone. You have to have evidence of that before you, and then for a judge to go and have me remanded in prison when I had committed no crime, and worse, again, when a judge preside over a matter in which there is obvious potential for bias, if his brother is prosecuting and he's judging, or his brother's law firm is prosecuting and he's judging, the law does not, the protection of liberty does not allow for that. And that same Article 5 says anyone who's deprived of their liberty, who is a victim of, who's had their rights violated in contravention of or contradiction of these protections, has an enforceable right to compensation. That's what is enshrined in law, and equally again in Article 5.4 is the right, is the equivalent of habeas corpus. Anyone who's deprived of their liberty has a right to have that detention speedily looked at by a court. So as I said, because we've taken that time to study, and in particularly what these people, what the authorities, what the state of the United Kingdom is now petrified of this perilous situation that they're in. Article 7 of the Human Rights Act 1998 makes it absolutely clear, no punishment without law. Now, most lawyers, on the surface of things, they would say, well, what that means is that we're all protected from retrospective application of the law. Meaning that if you did something today and which wasn't illegal, and they made a law tomorrow, they couldn't come and arrest you tomorrow for the act that you did yesterday. So, or today. So that's the general interpretation which lawyers will give you. However, Article 7 is open to a much wider interpretation. Article 7 is the equivalent of the contract between the state and its citizen. And the state says, I will give you protection of law. However, you must agree to obey the laws. And if you don't agree, if you don't obey the laws, I will punish you, either by way of a fine, imprisonment, or in some cases both. On the other hand, for the state says, if I break the law myself or ourselves, then I can't seek to punish you for any action, any act of law breaking that you might engage in. So that's why it says no punishment without law, no punishment outside the protection of law. whether it be the state who has pushed you outside the protection, or whether the state itself has gone outside the law, having broken it and so on, without remedy. So Article 7 is, I would say, the equivalent of what was Clause 61 of the Magna Carta, which established the principles of no one is above the law. So some may know that then the 25 barons held King John at sword point to make him, because at the time King John believed that he was only answerable to God. And so these barons said, no, you can't just go around doing as you wish, etc. If you do wrong, you've got to be held to account as well. And so that, as I said, Clause 61, that said, if we've wronged you and failed to remedy it, you may do whatever you want. You can seize our castles, you can disobey the law, you can do whatever you want, except harm our persons. But once we've rectified the situation, you must agree to return to obeying the law. Now,
thank you very much, Carl. What I'm going to do, Carl, just so we can make sure we get everybody involved, if we can just go through to your involvement in the community. Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to share one of the slides, and if you could just briefly go through that, and then we'll go more into the acts and sections of the Human Rights Act, if that's all right.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. So, with that being said, let me share my screen. Okay. So we should all be able to see the slide now. Mm-hmm. So, brother, if you'd be so kind enough just to briefly go through those particular points which have been put on the slide there.
Okay, so, well, thank you for, I hope I haven't bent your ears so far. This is a long story. So basically, Galaxy Radio, which is mentioned on there, when I think it was the owner of Galaxy Community Radio Station who saw one of my posters out on a bus stop or something like that one day, and he invited me into the station to come and tell my story. And thereafter, ever since then, I've had great support from the community. In any time I'm appearing in court and so on and so forth, they will always show up in their numbers. Now, how we've been able, as a result of what I've just said to you, the authorities are petrified of having me in court in whatever way. So I've been able to assist members of the community as a Mackenzie friend, whether it be in the criminal courts, the civil courts, or even the family courts. I've been able to assist them with whatever matters they are facing. So I've had someone's child returned to them. I've had cases where, as I've mentioned before, someone being prosecuted, and their case will be dismissed. The prosecution case will be dismissed in some cases, even without the matter being heard. As a matter of fact, just this Monday, we was in court at the High Court. It was a case that should have been in the London Crown Court, but because of the current backlogs, this one was held at the High Court in the Strand. They weren't expecting us. They didn't know we were involved, because we only recently got involved. And I think we certainly took them by surprise. So a matter which had been going on for 3 years, and it would seem even the lawyers involved with the defendant, it seems they were colluding to have her convicted. However, our involvement just brought things to an abrupt halt. Well, at the very least, a judge looked at the evidence that the prosecutor was relying on and basically ended up saying, stripping all away the emotions and so on and so forth, I can't see where a crime has been committed here. So I'm going to put this matter back for 3 weeks so that the Crown Prosecution Service at the highest level can seriously consider whether this matter is a public interest matter and should be going ahead. So, and I know, again, that's because of our involvement. So we've just been a platform for the community, whether it's bringing cases against the local authorities or simply defending them when they're being dragged through the system. And we've been getting great support from the community in return as well. So we kind of turned around this situation to a major advantage, and we have a number of cases that we intend to present this year, cases against the relevant authorities.
May I kindly ask there, Cole, if you could just elaborate on what a Mackenzie friend is, please?
Okay, so a Mackenzie friend, lot of 80% of laws, you hear some people talk about common law and statute and so on and so forth. 80% of the laws in the United Kingdom are made up, are judge-made laws, and that's generally known as common law. But the other 20% is statute and acts of parliament and so on. And they're the ones, those 20%, they're the ones that really have an impact on our daily lives. So although there are many people that talk about common law, it is really statute laws and acts of parliament that the courts recognise. In terms of Mackenzie, it came about as a result of a previous case case precedent rather, where someone who was by the name of Mackenzie was appearing in court. I believe they were legally represented, but they were nonetheless very, very uncomfortable and nervous and didn't understand the proceedings and what was taking place. And they asked if they could have a friend, sit with them and maybe try and explain to them whilst even though being represented by a lawyer. And as a result, the judge presiding over that matter agreed. And from there on, anyone, especially a litigant in person, has the right to a Mackenzie friend. Now, a Mackenzie friend may not necessarily have audience. They don't have a right of audience in court. They're generally just there to assist with, maybe looking through books or paperwork or whatever. But courts will give, some judges will give, depending on the circumstances, audience to a Mackenzie friend. And I've been fortunate that most of the times, most of those whom I've assisted, they've always agreed to give me the right or the opportunity rather to address the court and so that, we could get our point across. So that's what a Mackenzie friend is, and that's how it came about.
Excellent. So if we just go on to the last slide of the day then, Cole, just before we go to Q&A, if you could just briefly discuss the sections and the acts of the Human Rights Act. So I'm just going to share the screen in a few moments. So you should be able to see that now. Okay, so yes, the Human Rights Act 1998. Now that's basically the European Convention brought into UK law in 1998. Prior to that, anytime anyone alleged a violation of a convention right, had to take the matter to Europe, to the European Court of Human Rights. But this is probably one of the best things that the Labour Party did when they came into power, they brought the Human Rights Act, which is, as I said, the convention rights into UK law, so that any such violations could be dealt with here rather than having to go to Europe. Now, if I start with, I know we've got Article 5 there, but if I start with the laws that bound the public authorities, so Section 6.1 of the Human Rights Act makes it absolutely clear that it is unlawful for a public authority to act in any way whatsoever which is incompatible with the rights enshrined in that act or in the convention. Section 7, 1 and 1A and B
makes it clear that a person who claims to be a victim of an unlawful act may rely on that unlawful act in any legal proceedings instigated against them by the state. So the violation, so like I was explaining earlier on, because of the wrongs that they did to me, the law allows me to use that as a defense for my actions of law breaking, if you like. And until or unless that is put right, that's what the law allows, and there's no getting around it. So as I explained earlier on, Article 5 is our protection of liberty. It says no one shall be deprived of their liberty except in a procedure prescribed by law. Article 6 says, you have the right, anyone in the determination of their civil rights and or obligations or any criminal charges brought against them, everyone has the right to be heard. And you have the right to represent yourself or to be represented by a lawyer. And if you can't afford a lawyer, then the state has to afford you one, especially if your liberty is at threat. Article 7, no punishment without law. That's a very, very, as I said, that's almost like the contract between the state and its people and its citizens. That no, I will not punish you if I don't keep the law, or if I fail to protect you with the law, and you should act outside of that protection, I can't come to punish you for that, for your action. So, and then Article 8 is the right to family life. Article 9, I can't remember. That's is that freedom of expression, and then 10 and freedom of association, and so on. Article 12, right to family life. Article 2. Am I going to embarrass myself here now? Article 3, freedom from torture and inhumane, degrading treatment. Article 4, freedom from protection against forced labor, as a protection against slavery, and so on and so forth. So yeah, those sections, section 6.1, one can always rely on that. As long as they're a public authority, they are duty bound to act within the law. And, like, no one can use the defense of, I'm acting under orders, or I'm only carrying out an order. Every section of the public authority. So, for instance, like when the police came and arrested me for an alleged breach of bail, they can't say that someone instructed them to come and arrest me. They have a duty and an obligation to make sure that their action is lawful. So there's no, I think that was established in the Nuremberg trials, that they can't say we're just carrying out orders. So yeah, I've already touched on common law. As I said, 80% of the laws, the laws in this country is made up of judge-made laws, and that's, I think, is generally what is regarded as common law. But the other 20% is what really governs our lives on a daily basis, and that's what they recognize in the courts. Yeah. Hi, Glenda. Nice talking with you. As a matter of fact, because I just saw a message from someone in the group just now. We've been able to assist people even from right here in London. We've have people made contact from other parts of the country, and in fact, earlier on today, someone, I think it's Nottingham, they called me and were asking me how can they set up a branch of Campaign for Truth and Justice in Nottingham, and I was giving them an example of how we might be able to do that, but because of the current lockdown situation, it might be very difficult to get that off the ground at the moment. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that call. What we're going to do now is go into the Q&A now. Quite a lot of knowledge there being given. Even I learned a few new facts there, even though me and Carl had a good 2 hours plus conversation call earlier.
Indeed. I hope I didn't take you by any surprise just now.
No. Like I said, sir, once again, knowledge is always key to learning and progressing. So what I'm going to do, everyone, I'm going to put Carl's details in the group chat. So you will see both the details for his actual, where he's actually based in London, his website, and his direct email address, and of course his mobile telephone number. So that is now in the chat, okay? So if anybody wants to reach out, by all means, you can do it directly or via TTIP. So if I could ask if anyone has any questions, by all means, please do either raise your digital hand or you can raise your physical hand and I will do my best to see you in the actual webcam, or alternatively, feel free just to write a Q in the chat. That's a Q for question, and then write your question. Okay, so we have a few hands up already. So if we could go to, first and foremost, our co-founder, Mr. Charles. Charles, please go back to me.
How you doing, Carl? Excellent presentation, a lot of information there, a lot of information. So I was sitting there with my pen and paper because there was a lot of stuff I didn't even know, to be fair. But I've got 2 questions for you. Firstly, I'm going to kind of approach it in 2 parts. So firstly, with the situation where we're leaving Europe, how does that affect human rights? Because I know, in essence, human rights is a European law, as far as I was aware. So that's the first question. And the second question is how, or in your opinion, or in your view, how legal is the current lockdown?
Very good question. Thank you, Charles. Now, in terms of a very good question in terms of the European Convention and so on, because even as we speak, this government is reviewing the Human Rights Act, and I think they may well water it down. I've been hearing and reading some articles that says that we still have access to the European Court, but I'm not entirely 100% sure on the accuracy of that. But it is quite worrying, in my view anyway, that they are reviewing the European, the Human Rights Act, which is directly taken from the European Convention. If there was nothing, you know, they say if it ain't broke, why fix it? But because it is a very, very powerful protection for the general public, and it seems to me that they may well take this opportunity to weaken it. And if that's the case, then it would suggest to me that we probably don't have that usual access to the European Court to go and have that enforced. I'm not entirely sure of that. But in relation to, as far as we're concerned, no matter how long it takes, because the issues we raise started before any changes or any exit, we'll still be able to rely on the Convention rights or the Human Rights Act in its fullest form until this matter is resolved. And someone can become a member of Campaign for Truth and Justice at the point of going to the gallows, and we could probably come to their aid there. In terms of, I think you know, the lockdown is questionable in the sense that, having been imprisoned, when they have a lockdown in prison, there are only 4 reasons that you can come out of your cell, and they are exactly the same 4 reasons we can leave our homes. Now, if you're an essential worker, because in prison the prisoners do all the work, whether it's in the kitchens, cooking, and so on and so forth. So they do all that. So they can come out. If it's healthcare, you can come out. You might be lucky enough to get let out for exercise, and you get out for food, for feeding. So exactly the same reasons that you can leave your prison cell are exactly the same reasons we can leave here. Now, they have categories of prisons in this country, so that, for instance, they have A, B, C, and D cats. Now, a D cat prison, you're not under any lock and key. At Ford Open Prison, the concern for the authorities there is how to keep the public out more than how to keep the prisoners in. So where we are now, as far as I'm concerned, we are simply our own officers. You know, we open and unlock our doors ourselves. So I've it's come to my mind that one could probably bring an action for false imprisonment. You know, because we are being imprisoned in the equivalent, as I said, of a DCAT prison. The only difference here is that we unlock our doors ourselves. And in a DCAT prison, in Ford Prison, you're not even locked in. There's no locks. You know, so it's absolutely we are no different right now in our homes to anyone being held at Ford Prison. No different whatsoever. So I think that's challengeable. As to in fact, you know, as I said, I started off by talking about my arrest with Sasha on the 16th of January. I mean, ridiculous. Today I received my fine notice, or my penalty charge notice. I think I'm really looking forward to this. I haven't looked at the details of it as yet, but you know, we were out on exercise. They kept talking about the distance we were. No, did we live locally or whatever? And I said to them, that's irrelevant, because Boris, who lives just here, went all the way to Stratford for his exercise. So we're following the leader, you know. And in fact, I wanted to find out from Sasha, because I want to bring an action against the police for false arrest, false imprisonment, and kidnapping, because that's what it was.
That's the other thing I wanted to ask. In your view, because to me, I don't think this lockdown is legal. I think it's a recommendation, but I don't know how legal it is in my view. And the question is, how enforceable is anything as a result of the lockdown? Because they're talking about the fines. I mean, they haven't started talking about imprisoning people, but they're talking about fining people, and that to me is symbolic of civil action as opposed to criminal action. So the question was, is it enforceable in your opinion? Because in my view, I didn't think it was, just based on the fact it feels like it's civil action. At the very worst, they can fine you. If you don't pay the fine, what can they really do? Do you see what I mean? But just your views on that.
Do you know what? Again, good question, because on the 27th of December, we held anti-vax protest in Rye Lane, Peckham. And I informed Scotland Yard about that, told them in advance that we was going to be doing it. And we went ahead and did it. I think there was about 200 of us who had gathered. We told them we were going to be there from between 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and we were there. We were there until about 5 p.m. And the police, they came along just after 3, and they wanted to know who was the organizer. So I volunteered my information as the organizer, and they said, "Do you realise you could be sent a fine up to £10,000?" and so on. And I said, okay, no problem. Just, you know, my name. As a matter of fact, before they said, look, have you got any ID at all on you to prove that it's you? Call Grant. So I gave them my driving license, and of course they have my details. I'm still waiting for that £10,000 fine. the one that I got on the 16th have come through, but we're still waiting for the £10,000 fine. And the police, we made the news, although they didn't show any of the protest itself or the gathering as it was. They only said on the news that a group of anti-lockdown protesters was broken up by the police, and a 58-year-old man is facing fines of up to £10,000. Now, the police didn't break it up at all. We were there until 5 p.m. in the evening. We finished what we were doing, and once we were packing up, the police in all their high vis came and stood amongst us, made it look to the community passing by like they were doing something, but they stood by from 3 p.m. in the afternoon. They stood by and just waited and waited, and they couldn't interfere. I mean, I can say to you, if you have, or your party has, any plans to engage in any public acts, and you would like, I can assure you that we can give you some sort of protection from harassment from the police.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. All right, let me move on, because I know there's a lot of people with a lot of questions. All right, but sure. Thanks again. All right, nice one.
Thank you
very much, both of you. So we have Julia. I believe I may have to unmute you. Allow me one moment.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say, Carl, I was absolutely fascinated and fixated in your testimonial. First of all, I would like to say such a tragic state of affairs that you've endured, and then to go on to turn a situation from a negative to be where you are today as a positive. You get a round of applause from me.
Thank you.
My question is, I love the term, and I shouldn't really, civil disobedience. I have to say that is something that really stands up, because the process that we're going through in terms of lockdown, what we can do and what we can't do, and if you want to try and exercise the law in that area, whether it be through exercise, and I know you're going through your own situation with that and you waited to see what's coming from that. I wonder if ever I find myself in that situation, I'm going to say I'm doing this under civil disobedience, just to see what they say, just to challenge the law, if you will. And I think the reason why I'm thinking of why I'm going to say my next question, it would be, I'm the founder of Peterborough Windrush in Peterborough, and I'm also a member of TTIP, and I'm also a member of Preston Windrush, and my colleague is here on the group with us this evening. We have got an example of somebody who is detained, and because of data confidentiality, I wondered if I was able to contact you a bit later and ask you if you are familiar with this person's situation, because I think it comes under your Article 5, moving on to point 6 of the Human Rights Act. And I think there's a couple of examples that I'd like to share with you to get some advice, but I would like to also take the opportunity to invite you on our free talk, hosted by Glenda Andrews, and just to see if we can tidy up a few loose ends for somebody who is currently detained.
Well, thank you, Julia. I think I know who you're talking about. I won't mention the name as you haven't, but I do think I know who you're talking about, and I'm familiar with Glenda as well. In fact, was it this week or last week I spoke to Glenda. It's rather unfortunate because the person you are referring to, it was great that they had set his trial back from October last year to December this year, which was some 14 months away. And I think that personally, I think that because they had become aware of, because he was using our logos to front his campaign. Once we started talking and so on, which he did that, with my full blessing and so on and so forth. And I was so proud of him because he's so eloquent and he's able to, argue his case and his position. Before I did speak to him before the morning that the police came to his home, and I had asked him to send me some details, like date of birth and so on and so forth, because if what he feared was, this detainment was going to happen, then we could try to invoke a habeas corpus application on his behalf. But he didn't send those details through, so I've not been able to do anything further since. As I said, I've spoken with Glenda, and she had informed me that that there was a lawyer or barrister on the case. But he has my full support. You all have my full support in anything that you would like to try to do on his behalf, without a question of doubt.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Carl. I've got one supplementary question.
Civil disobedience, sorry. Just to clarify, I mean, civil disobedience, just all it does is describe a non-violent act of breaking the law. That's all. So yeah, as long as it's non-violent and you know that what you're doing, and you're doing it for the sake of, if you like, creating a platform to say, this is the only reason why I've done it, because no one else has been listening. I think the most recent example is what the Extinction Rebellion people have been doing. Those are examples set by ourselves, but they've been deliberately going out and getting themselves arrested and through civil disobedience. And then once they get into the courtroom or on whichever platform, they say, yes, I did it, but these are the reasons why I did it. So that's all civil disobedience.
Thank you, because
only the thing to do.
Thank you. My supplementary question, I think, was answered with your last response there, because obviously, because of the pandemic and the restrictions of movement, if we wanted to do anything in terms of the campaign or supporting a concern that's happening now, everybody is prevented or led to believe that we're prevented from doing so. So I wondered if I was to test the waters just to see what the response is, because I wonder if indeed the police would know what to do under that situation. Because it's interesting, you said you did a gathering and you were there till 3 till 5, nothing happened, but to the greater public, the police backed off, and it wasn't until at the end of day then they gave the impression that they were breaking something up. But during that period of time, you were able to do what you needed to do. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. And you remind me, actually, because we're really going to be testing them this weekend, because we've got an event planned in recognition of Bob Marley's and Dennis Brown, their birthday, and commemoration of those who lost their lives in World War II, or those from our community in particular. We're going to be conducted a gathering again at Windrush Square in Brixton, and that's going to be taking place this Saturday. So it's going to be interesting to see how the police respond to that, because they have literally, when we gathered in Parliament, I say gathered, there was a handful of people in Parliament Square on the 16th of January when we went there to stand in solidarity. Before, I don't know if there was 10, 15 people there when an army of police just came and said, this is in breach of coronavirus regulations and no gathering and so on and so forth, etc., etc. So they were hell-bent that nothing was going to take place. It may well be that they behave differently in some places, depending where it is, because people passing in Parliament Square and so on and so forth, everybody is going to be saying, "What's going on there? What's that? How comes they?" So they may well seem to be wanting to be seen to be taking action. Whereas when we were in Rye Lane, I know that they had a difficulty because they knew that I had put myself forward. I wasn't the organizer. However, I was involved, but I volunteered myself as the organizer. So if you're going to fine anyone, then send the fine to me, because they know that I'm going to take advantage of that, because I'm not going to pay the fine. And if you prosecute me to court, then I'll achieve what I want to achieve, and so on. So up till now, as I said, since the 27th of December, we're now in February, I still haven't received the threat of their fine. But they went on Good Morning Britain telling the country that they broke up an anti-lockdown protest, and that the organizer is facing fines of up to £10,000.
Thank you.
Did that help? Did that answer the question, please?
Extensively, thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Julie.
Excellent. Thank you again there, Carl. So our next person to ask questions is Alan. Alan, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Greetings.
Hi, Alan.
Hi. Hi, Cole.
Hiya.
Great chat. Thank you for this information. It's been really helpful.
Thank you.
For the last 2 years, or maybe longer, I've been on the verge of civil disobedience. Fortunately, I found a TTIP party, and I feel like if we cannot change the rules, if we can become the power or the government, we can then make our own rules, that actually help us. But it is, it's really coming to a crunching point with this, the law. You seem to, no matter what you do, you can't win. You did say a point about another person had a higher sentence than you, even though they had you had a lesser crime than them. So in my experience, I've found that when you try to challenge the police or the courts, they give you a harsh.
Sorry, Alan.
Sorry?
Sorry, I had a higher sentence than someone who had more. They had more cannabis than myself.
Right.
And they got a far less sentence than me.
Which is ridiculous.
But it was political. I accept my sentence was political as opposed to lawful.
Yeah, but what my point is that in my experience as well, is that when I try to challenge things, the courts are like, well, if you challenge, we're going to hit you a lot harder just for, trying to exercise your rights, basically, because you've got the right to try and prove yourself innocent or challenge. But they're saying, well, if you plead guilty, then we'll be very light with you. And if you challenge, they are so much harder on you. And I think that's kind of a problem as well. It's like, what's the point of giving us rights if when we try to exercise those rights, you punish us a lot more just for the mere fact that you're saying, well, I'm innocent and I'm trying to prove that I'm innocent. And you're saying, well, no, you're in court because you're guilty. Does that make sense?
Well, you're right, because that's what they say. They say, for instance, once you've received your sentence, and if you're in prison, and in fact, lawyers don't often tell you this. If you want to appeal against your conviction or your sentence, they say, do you realize if you lose, then you could lose. The lawyers tell you could be made to start your sentence all over again, which is not true. The maximum that you could lose, if you lost your appeal, if you appealed against all advice and lost, the maximum that you could lose from time served is 28 days. But they don't tell you that. They tell you that you could lose some of the time that you've already served, and that puts off a lot of innocent people from even people who have been wrongfully convicted because they've been inside, let's say, 6 months already or a year already, and that fear of losing and having to restart the sentence, it kind of puts the fear into people, obviously. And so, but It just depends. It depends from which angle you're approaching. For me, I approach it from a point of principle. So if you're going to, in fact, where at the start of the trial for the cannabis thing, they sent a barrister to me. I didn't ask for a barrister, but they sent a barrister to offer to represent me. So I told the barrister what I wanted her to say, and she said she couldn't say. So then I said, well, I would rather go to prison for 10 years, having represented myself, than go to prison for 1 year with you representing me and not saying what I want to say. And I think to some extent that's probably why they gave me 8 years. But the point was that on principle, I won't bow to them, and that's the only way we can fight them, on principle.
Yeah, you're a braver man than me, because I wouldn't want to go to jail for 10 years for nothing. So,
I wouldn't. Nelson
I hear you. I 100% hear you.
Mandela didn't want to go to prison for 10 years, 27 years, but our ancestors have shown, whether it's prison or our lives, when it comes to our rights and protecting and standing up for what's right, they use the threat of imprisonment and all those things to keep us in control, if you like. They use those things to prevent us from standing up for our rights. So I would rather be spending 10 years with my family than 10 years in prison. But on the basis that you left my child to die from dehydration, and then you broke up my family. 10 years in prison is nothing in comparison to the death of my son or breakup of my family and so on and so forth. Until when we demonstrate to them that, look, I'm not fearful of your threat of imprisonment. There is a saying that says, give me justice or give me death. Give me justice or give me death. As I said, when we move on those principles, it makes it very, 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 very difficult for them.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
And thank you very much for that. May I just bring everyone's attention back to the group chat. So once again, by all means, we are always looking for people to become members of the TTIP party. Please note, I have also put in a link for a quick survey, being via SurveyMonkey. Literally takes 2 minutes at best. So if you could please fill that in, that way we can make sure that we keep you updated and informed moving forward. Like I said, very short and sweet, unintrusive, and it just makes sure that you are in the mix. And by all means, more importantly, please do tell a friend to tell a friend. We're here for you. We're not against you. By all means, if you have something more important or something more pressing, you'll see Amina's email in there as well, Amina at theinitiativeparty.org.uk, whom you can always email with your particular question. And I'm sure she will get back to you in a timely manner. So, with that being said, we'll move swiftly on to Empress Judah. Just for time constraints, one and all, once again, I keep in mind that we did have all that nonsense to begin with as well. So, obviously, we usually would have finished at 10, but obviously, due to the bad guys doing what the bad guys do best, we'll go a tad bit over. But if we could all just be a tad bit more short with our questioning for call, so we can get as many in without hitting the twilight hours. So with that being said, Empress Judah, I am going to unmute you, and if you could go ahead and ask your question, please. Okay, Empress Judah, are you still? I'm trying to unmute you there. Okay, not entirely sure what's happening there. We'll come back to Empress Judah in a few moments. So we'll move on to the next person, who is Glenda. Glenda, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. So if you allow me a few moments. And if you could ask your question, please.
Hi.
Hi there.
Hi. Because I came late, I was going to ask you if you could just in your way share what you said about common law, because I'd like to hear what it is. If that
okay, so I'm not going to pretend that I have a great deal of knowledge on common law. What I understand is that 80% of the laws in this country are judge-made laws, and they're regarded as common law. But the other 20% of the laws are laws that are made through acts of parliament or statutes or whatever, and they are the laws that really impact on our daily lives, and they're the laws that they recognise in the courts and through the processes and so on and so forth. I know that there are a lot of people who advocate common laws and or who advocate common law, and they say things like to the police, "I do not consent," and so on and so forth. I've never seen any examples of those things working, and personally, I wouldn't advocate. I wouldn't tell anyone to rely on those laws in going through the courts, because I have no example, no proof of them working. But I have been using the Human Rights Act quite successfully, and I stand by that.
Thank you. And just one last question. So would you say then that the human rights law has sort of taken precedence over common law? Because I know it was very common many years ago, but I don't think it was used or talked about as much in the UK as it was in say America.
Yeah. Human rights. As far as I understand it, the human rights, they take precedent over, basically, because that's what is. The Human Rights Act is our protection against the public authority. So it tells the public authority how they must behave, and it tells us what rights we have as a basic. If public authorities are going to interfere in any way whatsoever in our lives, whether that be our liberty, whether it's freedom of association, whether it's right to education, etc., whether it's the rights to found a family and so on, family life. So I think in this jurisdiction, the Human Rights Act does take precedent. And in any court proceedings that you're going through, one of the questions that is asked as a tick box: does this matter involve any human rights? Those have to, if it does, then that has to be thrashed out and looked at.
Thank you, Cole.
You're welcome. Thanks for the question.
Excellent. So we're going to try and unmute Empress Judah again. Failing that, I will ask the question on her behalf.
Darren, Empress just put a message in the chat saying that she's happy for you to read it out.
Okay. So, Cole, question being, if you don't want to take the experimental COVID vaccine, what part of the human rights legislation please can be referenced if the government starts door-to-door COVID testing?
right to privacy, the right to private life, which is that's under Article 8. So they cannot compulsory. There's no compulsory. It's all voluntary at the moment. It's all voluntary, and as far as I understand it, there is no plans for any mandatory vaccinations or anything like that. It's all voluntary, and that comes under the right to private life, the right to the privacy of your life, your body. You can say what goes in or doesn't go into. So yeah, at the moment they can't force anyone to either do the test or take the vaccine. I understand they may come through the back doors with airlines saying, oh well, you can't come on our aircraft or our airplane if you haven't had a vaccine, if you haven't got a vaccine certificate. I understand companies can probably do that with the blessing of the government, so through the back door. But then again, as I mentioned to Alan about principle, it's then up to us to say, well, okay, if you're going to force me to have a vaccine, if it means I don't go on holiday, then so be it. I won't go on holiday, but I'm not going to go against my principle. And in the end, they have to think about what it will cost them in loss of business if they're going to tell people that they have to be vaccinated before they can get on board their aircraft and things like that.
Excellent.
Answers, Empress Judah. Thanks for the question.
Brilliant. Okay, so with that being said, we'll go on to Mukhtaru. So Mukhtaru, I'm just going to unmute you now if you'd like to ask your question. Mukhtaru, are you speaking? You're sounding very low there, Mukhtaru. Okay.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Much better, thank you.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Brilliant. Okay. Hello, Cole. Good evening, Cole.
Hi.
I just wanted to ask, what would you say would be the difference, and is there a major difference between between lawful and what's the other one? Lawful and legal.
Legal. Okay. Good question. Was that the question?
Yes, that is the question. Trying to understand the difference between lawful and legal.
Okay, so let me see if I can put that. That's the same thing, but here's the difference between something might be unlawful simply because it occurred as a result of a misinterpretation of the law or so. So you could have an unlawful imprisonment, for instance, because a judge misunderstood the law and made a mistake. That would be unlawful. But where they've deliberately done something, like again, when I refer to when I was picked up by the police for this for this alleged breach of bail, that wasn't an unlawful arrest. That was a wrongful arrest. That was criminal. So if I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the difference between something that might be it's lawful to arrest someone, but they've got to go through a procedure. It's got to be justifiable. Yeah. I think.
So does that,
go on.
Sorry to cut you. Does that coincide with being? Is it that statutes and law in terms of why do people sometimes refer to statutes as not being lawful? Is it because is it because it's a state of an opinion, or is it because it's just by government? I don't try to understand.
Yeah. So I don't personally make a difference between statute or act of parliament. I've not researched the difference in terms of what's a statute. I just go, what if they say this is the law, and that's the law that they're going by. I mean, I don't know if you're coming from the common law approach, but I don't advocate. I don't knock the common law, but it's not part of my own personal advocacy. As I said, I've heard over the past 20 years and more, I've heard many people talk about common law and so on and so forth. As a matter of fact, I know of a common law advocate who had their children taken away from them because they refused to have them registered with their birth certificates and things like that. And the only way that they were able to get their children back was to conform to the norm, if you like. So I don't advocate arguments of common law. I'm not knocking it. I've just never seen it in work or in practice, and I've never seen it being used successfully. So yeah, I just go according to what they say is the rule of law.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Thanks for your question. I hope that helped in some way.
It did. Thank you very much.
Good.
Thank you once again, Carl. Thank you there, Mukhtaru. Okay, moving on to one Tawny. I'm going to unmute you, and if you'd like to give your question there. One Tawny.
Hello all.
Evening.
Evening, yes. So my question to Mr. Grant is how do you go about becoming a Mackenzie friend?
Okay, hi, Wantoni. Thanks for your question. So a Mackenzie friend is as far as I understand and know, it's just a Mackenzie friend can be anyone at all. If you were going in court and you said, I want to have a friend, I want to have someone sit with me, especially if you're representing yourself. If you are a litigant in person and you say to the judge or whoever, I want to have a friend with me, then that friend is known as your Mackenzie friend. I am aware that there are some people who set themselves up as Mackenzie friends and would have seek to charge people for that. So I've never done anything like that myself. So as I said, anyone can be a Mackenzie friend. It doesn't necessarily describe someone who's trained in law or who even has any knowledge of law. A Mackenzie friend is just a friend you choose to come to court with you, and who the court will allow, if you like, to sit alongside you in court during the proceedings.
Okay.
All right.
Cool. That was really informative. Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Thank you again. Okay, we're going to some questions in the actual chat there. By all means, if there's still anybody who wants to verbally give a question, please raise your hand either digitally or via your webcam, or alternatively, just put a Q for question in the chat and then write your actual question. So 2 more questions for you there, Carl. Thank you again for being with us as long as you have this evening. First question. Would you ask what entity the fine came from when Cole got the fine in the post?
I got the fine came from an organization, I think it's ACRO. The letter is in my room. I'm going to examine it later on. But it came from an organization. I think it's ACRO, ACRO. I've seen posts about this thing saying that it's a police organization or whatever. As a matter of fact, I'm glad I got it because I was hoping to, because they didn't give me anything on the night of my arrest or our arrest. I haven't got any proof of it. So, and because I want to bring a case against them for false arrests and false imprisonment and kidnapping, this document came just in time today because that's my proof. They claim that we were in breach of coronavirus regulations, and that's what the fine's about. But as far as I'm concerned, I was out on my daily exercise, on one of the essential things that I'm entitled to be out of my home for. And they cannot prove that they didn't see me stood in one place. I was walking along Whitehall we were walking along Whitehall when they stopped us, and so we're going to bring a charge. Sorry, I think I've drifted from the question there. I think Darren.
That's okay. So the question again, was, would you ask what entity the fine came from when Cole got the fine in the post?
Yeah, so as I said, it came from an organization called ACRO, ACRO. Yeah, that's what's on there. I didn't take any particular well, in fact, I only picked it up this evening when I was coming in to prepare myself for this meeting. So I've not looked in details, other than I saw that it was a £200 fine for being in Whitehall on the 16th of January.
I was going to say it comes back to one of the earlier questions I asked in how enforceable these are, because what I'm hearing is that the police are setting up private companies and effectively fining people through these private companies. So the fines aren't even actually lawful fines. What they're doing is they're using the coronavirus situation in order to make money. And what I've heard is that they're effectively setting these up as two private police individuals, setting up a company and issuing fines in order to receive the fines. These fines aren't even going to the government, because they're the things that I was hearing.
That's what I've heard as well, and so on. So I'm kind of looking forward to dealing with it. I don't know where it's going to take me. Obviously, then there is absolutely no way that they're going to get not a single penny out of me. But if I can use that situation to my advantage, then that's what I'm going to do. Yeah. So be interesting to know if Sasha got her fine as well.
She'll have to update you with that one later on tonight, sir. Okay, so we've actually got another question where I will actually let you give your opinion there, Cole, and then I'll actually give my personal opinion on this next question from Janet, because I've actually experienced, Jackie, forgive me, dear. Jackie, not Janet, because I've actually experienced something very similar myself, so I'll actually give my actual true lived experience. So here comes the question. My dad went into hospital with a minor stroke. He called me after about a week to say that he gets more than 5 to 10 minutes of physio. He believes he can come out. The next day, the doctor called me to say he contracted COVID. They said they don't know how he contracted it, as he didn't go anywhere, and none of the other patients have it, or those looking after him. He is still in hospital, God forbid, if he should pass away. What are my rights?
Oh wow, that's a tough one, because obviously they are preventing him from having any visits because they're claiming that he's got COVID, presumably, and so it makes it very difficult for anyone to go in there. Is she able to have any phone contact with him, or you know?
From personal experience, Jackie should be able to have call contact with him. So that would either be if Jackie, I do apologise, unless I take you off hold, I'll have to speak on your behalf. But speaking on me being in a similar position with my father when he was in hospital with COVID, I was able to make contact with him through a few various methods. Number one being via him on his own phone, on his mobile. Number two, failing that, which was a tad bit discerning, there was another type of app you could download on your phone, what the hospital does have in use. Please forgive me, everyone. I can't remember the name of the app, but it was something I needed to either download on my phone in order to do a similar face-to-face like you would do on WhatsApp. Jackie, if you would like to interject. Oh, she has. He has a mobile phone and we call him often. Yes, he has his own mobile phone. So yes.
So I think, in terms of if they've said he's got COVID if he's got COVID, as long as it would seem at the moment it's just isolation rather than anything else, because what would be worrying is if they had him on a ventilator where this ventilator was doing the breathing for him, because a friend of mine, his wife, very young, she's in her 40s, and she went in with COVID symptoms, and they had her on a ventilator. When I found out, I was just so concerned that because it was I think during the second lockdown, whereas during the first lockdown it would seem that any one of us went in hospital with any such symptoms, even if it wasn't those symptoms, as long as we went into hospital, we weren't coming back out alive. So when my friend informed me that his wife was on a ventilator, I, as I said, was very, very worried, and we just kind of started saying certain things, if anything happens to her, and this and that, etc., 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 all hell is going to break loose. And then it was such a relief when I got told that she's no longer on the ventilator, and she's eventually back at home now. So I think the worry would be if he was on a ventilator, but whilst he's there and able to communicate, I think maybe, I don't know, maybe if they claim that they detected COVID, maybe they have a responsibility to ensure that he isolates before he's released. I don't know, maybe that's what they're doing.
So with that being said, Jackie, because this it's going to be a bit awkward if we're asking questions and you're responding via text. Question from me to you, Jackie. Has your father been moved to what's called a warm ward? You have a warm ward, that's for those who have been affected by COVID. You have a cold ward for those who have not been infected.
A warm ward.
Okay, so he's on the infected ward there. Right. Is there anything else you would like to add there, Cole? Because like I said, by all means, I can actually give Jackie a few pointers moving forward.
I think I'd hand over to you and let you interject from there, Darren.
Many thanks, brother. So once again, Jackie and family, it was a case where my father was brought into hospital with pneumonia and apparently COVID. Apparently shallow breathing, one of the causes of so-called COVID, and of course pneumonia, so take your pick. Whilst in hospital, it was a case where I was phoning incessantly, day in after day, day in, day out, so to speak, speaking to numerous nurses who was advising me, your father's doing well, your father's doing well. when I was able actually to get him onto his mobile phone and speaking to him, it was a case where he wasn't sounding as well as they was telling me he was doing. Literally hardly could do a conversation for nearly 2 minutes before it's like he nearly dozed off. Anyway, sticking to the point, it's a case where he probably was going on probably a week, and I'm thinking, right, should be hearing something much better than just he's doing all right, he's in good hands. Pressing the point, what are we doing here? Where are we going from here? To the point where I actually got a call from a doctor, a junior doctor, in my opinion, then advised me, well, we believe he has got, pneumonia. We're giving him antibiotics. We're trying to make sure he's, getting over the worst of it. Fine. How's the COVID aspect? Yeah, we're testing him daily just to see how he's getting, because for one and all, as you may or may not know, it's all very well with the testing centre, but one day you could go and test in a testing centre for COVID. You may not have it. You may go and test in the testing centre the following day. You may have it, and vice versa. So as we went by, it's a case where they're saying, well, we don't really think the COVID is the issue there. We just actually think it's down to the pneumonia, hence more antibiotics. What did shock me, however, was the what's known as pardon me, I do apologise, a DNR. That's do not resuscitate. Okay? So ultimately, for those who do not know what that means, that basically means should the worst happen, well, ultimately, they're asking me, they actually tried to ask my father in the condition he was in, well, Mr. Brian, if the worst gets the worst, should we not try to attempt to revive you? Of course, I thought we was jumping the gun there, by all means. So once again, I'm going back and forth with this doctor, asking various questions in terms of why are we even getting to this point, what exactly is being done to him right now of the antibiotics, and why are we even having this discussion. In her defence, apparently this kind of discussion does have to be had with those near and dear to said patient. So, okay, understandable. However, on trying to, in my opinion, push the issue regarding the DNR, well, number one, as I advised the nurse, or I should say, and the doctor, my father is in no way, in any shape or form of the correct mind, body, or soul to actually speak on said issue. So that right there, knock it on the head. Speak to myself, thank you. I will now go away and research said DNR. But until then, you have a Clandestine no from me. So that was after week 1. We're rolling into week 2. Once again, got another call from a doctor. Same thing again we're speaking about. Keep in mind, I'm still calling the hospital day in, day out. I will also advise everybody here who finds themselves in a similar position to myself and what Jack is going through, make sure you are phoning the hospital daily. Make them aware there is family on the outside. Make them aware there will be consequences if anything goes wrong or if anything goes amiss. Ask questions. Research. Do not allow them just to tell you, yes, things are phone. No. Ask the questions. And if you feel you're being given the wrong information, we'll get onto that in a few moments. Now, on top of that, like I said, it's the case where you're getting doctors telling you, a second doctor telling me about another DNR. This time she felt she would be a bit more graphic. Well, this is a problem, Jackie. They will reduce it slowly. So, Jackie, my question to you there, as I was asking both the doctors, have you asked them what the treatment plan is for your father? I'll just wait for Jackie to respond in the chat. If you bear with me, family. Yeah, they are talking about palliative care, but I will be calling tomorrow. Okay. Yeah, I would sincerely ask you, Jackie, to start asking what the treatment plan is. Okay? Because this DNR, which I think they give one too many times on that palliative care, as we both know, if we're going down that route, that is not boding well. It's not boding well. So on top of that, ask to speak to the head consultant, not just your doctor, what does the rounds. Now ask to speak to your head consultant. Our sister Glenda has also put in the chat regarding the power of attorney is required as well. Okay, but ultimately, like I said, ask now to speak to the head consultant. Ask about the treatment plan. Okay, we're supposed to be getting these people better, not going down one route because of his age. Because as we both know, I can see Brother Cole with his hand up. Brother Cole?
Yeah, I just wanted to interject and say, because that the DNR is something that, I was confronted with my own mother, and obviously not to do with COVID, but I was approached, she was in hospital, and I was approached by the doctors looking after her, and they said, we would consider not resuscitating and so on and so forth. My mother was still with us a year after. A year after they said that. Yeah. So for me, the advice that you're giving to Jackie is just crucial. And if they've detected he's got symptoms of COVID or whatever, etc., because I don't believe there's any actual treatment. It's just a question of again, I'm not speaking from a professional point of view or having gone through it, but it just seems that there is they're giving him dairy products which doesn't help. I mean, if he goes into, if he's when anyone has symptoms, what they require is for people to go into isolation for, it used to be 14 days, now it's 10 days. So if he's done that isolation and he's still functioning by himself, then he should come home. They should allow him to come home rather than keep him in a situation. Not 10 days yet. No, okay, that's fair enough. But after 10 days, he should be allowed to come home if he's not, going through any major difficulties or anything like that requires him to stay in hospital. Exactly 10 years after they tried to write him off. Yeah. So this do not resuscitate is their that means that if they're going through anything and it looks like they will just ease them out rather than try to help them to stay alive. So I would he has stroke, so he needs physio. What? Okay. Well, as long as he's able to keep up his physio and things like that, but that do not, or DNR hanging over his head. It's almost like they're waiting for that situation to arise, so that they don't do anything to. You're welcome, Jackie. They don't do anything to assist him. As I said, it's terrible situation. I hated that question when they asked me that. I couldn't even answer it. I cowardly directed them to my sister. And as I said, my mother came out of the hospital and she was at home. She was at home here with me for a year before she eventually comes. That's what I wanted to say to them.
That's fine there, bro. Thank you. So where did I drop off there? No, that's fine there. So by all means, it's a case of making sure you are speaking to the head person, quite frankly, being the actual head consultant. Now, what I am also doing, Jackie, I'm also writing some information in the group chat for you to also, hopefully, will help you as well. Now, after speaking to said head consultant, if you're still not happy with what you're being told, there is something out there by the name of PALS. That's Patient Advice Liaison Office, okay? Now, I'm literally put that in the group chat now. Within PALS, that means you can either raise a complaint or raise a concern, okay? So I see you've already got that, Jackie. Excellent. Now, ironically, it's very interesting how when you raise a concern or complaint via PALS, in my case, certain people finally got a case of act right. Certain people in there, certain nurses were aware of it and their attitude changed. Not for the better, mind you. So just ensure that you make them aware they're there to do a job and not to take offense at something you believe is near and dear and needs to be dealt with. Okay? So with PALS, once again, it's been logged and evidenced, as you say. There you go. And another thing, like Glenn just says, always document evidence and by email. What I did, Jackie, every day, which I spoke to whoever it was, a nurse or doctor, I literally was on the phone, hands-free, writing down exactly verbatim what I was saying and what they were saying. Another thing to do as well, as our good sister Julia Davidson advised me, make sure that whatever they're telling you, you respond back to them. You literally reply back to them with exactly what they're saying. For example, okay, your father's oxygen is low due to A or B. So let me understand this. You're saying my father's oxygen is low due to A and B. That way you are clarifying with them, you know exactly what they are talking about. And that way you cannot be fobbed off neither, okay? And like I said, do not feel that you can ask them as many questions as you want, Jackie. Do not let them deter you, whether that be by their bad attitude or them being flustered. They are professionals at the end of the day. They deal with people day in, day out. They chose the career. If they can't handle it, get out. And I'll be as brutal as that. No one forced you to be a nurse. No one forced you to be a doctor. But just like you being a professional in your own right, you go to work or you run your own business, you've got to be the bloody best you can be. And the same applies to anybody else in whatever role, whatever job you do. If you've got pride in one's job and oneself, that is. So, like I said, I hope that information I've given you there, Jackie, is relevant. I hope all the information Cole has given you is spot on. If there is anything else you need, Jackie, okay, I'm going to put my mobile number in the group, okay? Feel free to reach out, and we can by all means sit down and discuss further, okay? Please remember, I'm only going on my own experience. Of course, I'm not a professional and whatnot, but like I said, it's very, very relevant to what my father has gone through. Oh, and another thing as well, Jackie, were you saying your father's having to do exercise? Does he have an occupational health therapist? Have they assigned that to him? And better yet, have they looked about getting him a social worker? I know quite a bit of information I'm throwing your way. Sorry, family. Bear with us there. He said he can't do therapy at the moment due to his low oxygen levels. It will be too taxing on his lungs. Right. Okay. So once again, that's plan A. What's plan B? And plan B is not palliative. No, we're not accepting that. Okay, Sister, you've got my contact detail in the chat. Feel free to reach out, okay? And hopefully what I've advised, what callers advised, hopefully it will be of great use to you and your family moving forward. With that being said, family, we all are now going on for 11:15. Thank you all for your endeavour and patience today. I apologise for the foolishness we had to endure at the beginning, but as I say, week in and week out, the bad guys will do what the bad guys do best. And as Calls had mentioned before, if we wasn't doing the right things, they wouldn't even trouble us. Mr. Gordon, would you care to say a few words?
I just noticed that Julia had her hand up, kind of avidly. She had something she wanted to say.
Sorry, thank you. Sorry, Sister Julia. Try and let me unmute you there.
Thank you, Darren. It was just to pick up by way of support to Jackie. I'm living testimonial of that as well. They tried to write my dad off 10 plus years ago by saying that he only had 6 months left. And there was a very long, lengthy discussion about palliative care, etc., etc. I'm here to say that my dad is in his 98th year this year, and it's with a level of support round the clock. I gave up actually historical employment working outside within the community, and may I add, in the care field as well, to RMA standards, which is Registered Managers Award. And Dad is thriving, Dad is living, and I think he's thrown the medical book through the window. May I suggest that you take on the medical field by not just dealing with the first row assistant nurses. You need to take it to the consultant. You need to get a health plan in place. I appreciate that he's got limited lung capacity, but that just means that he only needs additional support, and palliative care means a quality of life either during the process to the end of his life with dignity. That means they have got no gestation on how long that end of life will be. But if you've got the correct mechanisms in place, the correct support in place, with additional, if he's got breathing problems, which is what you're suggesting and what they've advised you, your dad will have access to what they call NHS continued healthcare support. So the information is there. Please, please put any questions that you have that you perhaps can't do this evening. I understand the passion behind this, for choice of a better word, but I would say use us to be able to support you through the minefield and the maze, because once you're already involved in a situation, sometimes you want to believe everything that's being said. But at least if you know that there is an extension of hands, care, because we are Black people, we need to do everything right by us. And sometimes the professionals do not always get it right. Okay? So please reach out to Darren and myself. And if there's anything with my experience and with my level of support with the team that I've got around me, I will endeavour to support you if you don't mind.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you very much, Julia. Okay, and I believe our brother has been waiting in the wings as well. One moment. Brother Nelly, where are you there? Right, I'm going to unmute you now, Brother Nelly.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Darren. Cole, I just want to say, first of all, thank you for your courage, your bravery. You are a really inspirational guy, so thank you so much. Could you just let us know basically what your are you saying so far, based on your child dying at 15 months, and being arrested, basically kidnapped. How are you anyway along the line with getting that sorted? Or are you just now doing this work to actually just do this work? Also, the TT, are you working with TTIP? And is there some kind of strategy? Because obviously, if there's a strategy with TTIP regarding civil disobedience with some overarching sort of aims, and if you don't mind, my last question is basically somewhat personal. But how is your family life now? You know, if it's indiscreet, sorry, but how's your family life now? And what's your marriage broke down, your family broke down, and have you been able to? Are you now remarried or whatever? If you don't mind my asking.
Well, thanks for your question. Sorry, I didn't get your name. Sorry.
Nelly.
Oh, sorry, Nelly. Thanks for the question.
Getting hard in here.
Oh, you can't? Can you hear me?
No, I'm saying it's like Nelly the singer, the rapper. It's getting hard in here, so take off all your clothes. Yeah, okay.
Right, good to you. Thanks for the question, Nelly. I'll start with the last question. I didn't retrieve or recover my marriage. My children all grown now, doing quite well. My eldest daughter, she's going to be 32 this year. My son, who my wife was pregnant with at the time, he's now 26. And we had a daughter was conceived after the breakup, and she's 22. And they're all doing quite well for themselves. And I'm in touch with them, yes. And in fact, my daughter has given me a beautiful granddaughter. Yeah. So sorry, Nelly. Take me back to the stop of your question.
The other question was basically, two questions. The other question was, has anything since the whole process of you being kidnapped and also being, and also what was done in hospital, is there anything going to be done further on that, or have you left that, or leave that to just percolate, and also just with the TTIP, and are you working with them in collaboration to kind of do civil disobedience as a strategy against this basically lockdown?
Well, that's something I'm absolutely open to in terms of the civil disobedience and working in collaboration and unity with TTIP. Absolutely, I'm open to that. In relation to the other question, the hospital did eventually settle out of court with regards to the negligent care of my son. That settlement was made with my wife. I wasn't interested in it, but it was settled. In relation to the issues of my false imprisonment and so on and so forth, great question, Nelly, and I really welcome it, because in November last year, we finally, and this came back to bite them in the butt, because, as I said, they offered me a job following my release from prison. They eventually offered me a job working within local government, and I held that job down for 9 years. And then until I was racially assaulted on street, I was subjected to a violent racist assault on street. And because of how I reacted, or because I reacted, not how I reacted, because I reacted, Serco sacked me. But that sacking, first thing, before they sacked me, I was at home for a whole year on full pay, which was a godsend, because I took that opportunity to be involved in my mother's care. In fact, even if they didn't sack me, I don't think I would have been able to go back to work anyway, because my mum had become so used to me being at home. Even when I wanted to go out to the shop, she'd say, "Where are you going? Where are you going? You can't leave me." So I wouldn't have been able to go back to work anyway. However, because they sacked me, it put me in a position where I could now claim for a fee exemption in filing a case against the authorities in the court. So in July last year, I filed a case with a face value of millions of pounds against the Secretary of State for Justice and the Home Office. And they sought to have the case struck out. That matter is pending appeal. even as we speak. So they're facing a huge, massive lawsuit, unprecedented lawsuit, and the only thing that's protecting them right now is the suppression of the silence, the conspired silence of the media. So if there's anything we could do jointly through this platform or any other platform for that matter, especially if we want to engage in civil disobedience and bring this matter to light, there is just so much involved in here for our people, our community. So yes, it's still very much alive, and it's in the High Court. In fact, just know the last time we were in High Court regarding this matter was in December last year. So, and we're waiting, as I said, for the outcome of our appeal application against their strikeout. All right.
Excellent. Right. Okay. Well, with that being said, once again, I think we can all give a thank you to Cole for coming on today. Absolutely brilliant there. And if I can allow one moment, let me see what I can do in these options. Yes. So I just asked all, you can actually unmute yourselves now. And if we can give Cole a virtual ovation, that would be brilliant. Woo!
Well done.
Thank you very much.
Really, thank you all so much for being so attentive and so, thank you. And, I'm more than happy to work with the TTI and all aim and objectives. As I said, I sit here, I'm so proud, in fact, that just by coincidence, there's my T-shirt that I collected on, I think it was when they did the Million People March and culminated in Hyde Park, and with Tupac, I beg your pardon, doing the one voice, this could be and is a great initiative, and I think that coming together we could probably become a very forceful, effective force here in the UK. The things that we're achieving in the courts already is just amazing, and they use the rule of law to abuse, to control, to whatever. It's in our hands now, and we can turn it round and use it in a very effective way. So once again, it was such a pleasure to be arrested. At the very least, here's one of the benefits: being arrested alongside Sasha Johnson when on the 16th of January. And it's been an absolute pleasure to be here and share this with you. And let's hope that it's something that we can use together to advance forward.
Well, I'd like to just add to that as well, Carl. Thanks again, because it has been amazing and a lot of information. I mean, there's a lot of sections in there that I hadn't even looked at, the Article 5, Article 6 and so on. So I really appreciate all that, and you sharing your story as well. It was quite deep and quite emotional. And I understand how it gets when you realise that the system is lawless and not here to help you. And the truth is, as long as we learn, one lesson I have in business is we've got to learn the rules of the game and play better than anybody else. And it's the simple principles that we need to apply to law. So we look forward to working with you on a few bits and pieces, because there's a lot of people out there who need our help. There's a lot of people out there who need to understand, and there's a lot of people out there that are getting taken advantage of purely because they don't understand. The truth is, there's a million laws out there. They can all be used and interpreted in our favour as long as we understand how to use and interpret them. And that's the knowledge that we need to start implanting onto other people. But even then, even if we can just offer them that shield, because I think as a group of people, we're very much victims in this system. We're very much Oliver Twist sitting on the sidelines with the begging bowl. And one of the incentives for me behind TTIP was to change that dynamic and get us some protection and some power. Because other than that, we'll always be victims of this system, and that's the problem that I see. So I think it's just about kind of cumulatively coming together and making those changes. So yeah, very much appreciate what you've done here today. Really appreciate it. Sorry about
so much, Paul.
Thank you.
And sorry about all the confusion earlier. They clearly didn't want anyone to hear what you had to say with the spamming.
That's right. I was smiling.
Yeah.
I was
worried.
Saying, I bet this hasn't happened before.
Yeah.
And they were aware of. I mean, there is no way, you being in the position that you are, you will already know. We're not making no delusional statements when we say you're monitored. They're going to monitor you. So they're going to know what you're doing. It's in their interest to monitor.
Yeah,
So it's hardly surprising when that started off like that. I've been in Zoom meetings before and never started like that. But I know, Darren told me that this is going to be live Facebook, live YouTube, live Instagram, etc. I'm thinking, oh, wow, and then, so as I said, it came with no surprise that all of that, the way it started, and it was interesting. I'm glad it was recognized by, if you're not having an impact, they're not bothered about you.
Yeah. My mum told me when I was a kid, when they stop talking and stop interfering, start worrying.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
so it's great to be here with you. Absolute pleasure.
And yourself, my friend.
Thank you very much. And
Cole, I would like to say to you, it was also a pleasure to have been arrested alongside yourself. And thank you so much. I've been here listening. It was an amazing talk, and keep doing the good work you're doing. And as being part of the ELC, I look forward to having talks with you about what we could work towards together.
Thank you so much, Sash. Sash, whilst you're there, I'm thinking of bringing an action against them for false arrest, false imprisonment, and kidnapping. So I don't know if you're interested in that as well, but we've got a year to do that. But I think within the next few months, I'm going to launch that action against them because they arrested us and took us to Brixton and then released us. What was their lawful reason?
Well, there was no lawful reasons, as we know. But I myself didn't receive. I haven't received the fine as yet. I doubt I will receive it.
Okay, I got mine today.
Gosh, as we know, lawbreakers can't be law enforcers.
There you go.
Right,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you on behalf of TTIP once again for sticking with us throughout the evening. Yeah, as I said, they really tried to shut us down with all that foolishness and the spamming and the with all that. Yeah, just horrible. It wasn't nice. But once again, thank you for enduring. Once again, we are stronger than those who try to tear us down. We are stronger together. We look forward to working with one and all. And please do actually consider being a member, helping, being a volunteer or supporter. Once again, I've put in the group or in the group chat on many occasions if you could actually fill in the survey as well. That way we can also make sure we keep you informed and up to date. And please tell a friend to tell a friend. So once again, on behalf of TTIP, we thank you all. Have a brilliant evening. Have a good rest for tomorrow. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you all.
Thank you for your hosting and thank you.
Thank you, Cole. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. Done a great job as always. All right.
Thank you, sir. If TTIP members, if you could stay behind, please, that would be appreciated.
Can I exit?